The bells of Grand Magers keep lingered on the early summer air like the last sigh of a storm. Their steady tolling flowed through shattered streets, down scorched alleys where half-crumbled balustrades still carried the blackened prints of dragonfire, and finally reached the crimson throne room itself, a cavern of crimson sunlight, flecked with drifting cinders that would take years to shake from stone. 3 days had passed since Jon Snow had taken that high seat. Each morning since, he rose in the pale hours before dawn, stripping away the mail he slept in, half expecting claws of guilt or grief to close around his heart. Yet the weight that met him now was different, duller, heavier, shaped like the crown of Aegon, forged of 1,000 silent oaths spoken in the ash-laden streets beyond the walls. He found the Iron Throne unnaturally cold. The blades that wove upward into monstrous wings still glimmered, but they were lifeless, robbed of the blood and fire that had birthed them. Jon had learned to approach it not as a seat of victory or punishment, but as a stone-rooted reminder of what a moment's fury could do. He would not carve roots of wrath across Westeros. He would carve paths of patience, even if the very idea of patience made his breath tighten with the memories of Daenerys' last embrace. A memory that still knocked against his ribs whenever he let the silence draw too long. He sat there now as light crawled through the rose-framed windows, turning ash and dust into gold. The small council stood at measured distance. Sir Davos Seaworth, salt-weathered and steady. Tyrion Lannister, leaner than loss itself, eyes bright with calculations he hardly voiced. Samwell Tarly, freshly sworn Grand Maester, quill tucked behind his ear like a sword he had finally dared to wield. And Brienne of Tarth, gloved hand resting upon the pommel of Oathkeeper, sworn as Lord Commander of the King Guard in a simple ceremony. Against pillars draped in tattered banners, Grey Worm lingered wordlessly in shadow, neither prisoner nor guest, but something between, a memory of the war, a scar too deep for salves. Jon's first decree had been silence. No public proclamations of triumph, no parades that would tear open wounds, only beginning to knit. Let the city breathe first. Let the dust fall. Thousands had stood under his balcony on the first evening, eyes searching for the Targaryen queen who would not come. They found instead a black-cloaked figure who called himself not king but guardian, vowing bread before glory, water before weddings, roofs before revelries. Those promises had drifted across the fires like soft rain. Whether they could cool the coals of grief remained a question whispered in 1,000 doorways. Now Davos cleared his throat, voice still tinged with the salt of Blackwater Bay. Grain stores from the Reach arrive by sundown, enough to see the city through 2 moons, mayhap 3, if the rats don't find the sacks afore we do. Lord Garland Tyrell sent word. Hay offers ships enough to ferry more if we settle the debts his grandsire claimed from the crown. 70,000 dragons. I mean, gold we don't have. Tyrion murmured, fingers steepled. Yet we have promises. Promises are wind. Wind fills sails. He flicked a glance at Jon. But wind alone cannot pay the sellswords still lingering along the Roserad. Their captains look north for coin, or a new employer. Beyond the shattered window, faint hammer blows carried from the street of steel. Jon exhaled. Tell Lord Garland, we will honor the debt. Not in gold we haven't yet coined, but in harvest rights. If the Reach ships our grain, we let their farmers claim taxed soil along the Blackwater for 5 summers. A gift that returns twice. Tyrion's brow arched. Sam's quill scratched, the new Grand Maester's script precise. It will bind their fields to ours, Sam said, and bind our bellies to them. Clever. Clever or desperate, Jon thought. He lifted his eyes to Grey Worm. The unsullied commander's face held no expression, yet anger glinted like frosted glass behind his lashes. Your men outside the gates? How many ride with you now? 8,000. Grey Worm answered, voice flat. The rest sailed east. East to Neath, to a promise made in whispers, while red ash still snowed from Drogon's wings. We remain, he went on, until justice is met. Justice cannot grow roots in ash, Jon said quietly, nor in blood that never stills. Memories pressed, Drogon's cry, Daenerys fading in his arms, yet he forced them down. Stay. Help me guard the city you once swore to free. When peace is planted, you may sail home with honor. Danterin. Grey Worm's lips tightened, but he inclined his head. It was not surrender, but it was not refusal. That was enough, for now. Outside, King's Landing was a patient carcass, flies of rumor buzzing louder than the carrion crows. But in the charred husk of Flea Bottom, children chased each other between blackened beams, eyes bright with the strange resilience of those too young to grieve properly. One such child pulled at Jon's sleeve as he walked the market incognito 2 nights later, coat plain, hair tied back to hide the silver thread now stitched into its dark. The girl held up a spindle of rag yarn. "Am Lord for luck," she said, voice high and fearless. "We spun it from dragon soot. Means rebirth." Jon crouched. "Is that so?" Gran says fire turns old to new." He accepted the spindle, heart tightening. "Keep it. When the new bakeries rise, trade that yarn for the first sweet roll out of the oven." Her grin showed missing teeth, but it was a sunrise after endless dusk. He watched her dart away, wondering if her world might finally grow into something kinder than the one he had known. In the chambers once reserved for the hand, Tyrion waited by a narrow hearth, tapping parchment with impatient knuckles. "I have lists, bricklayers, tanners, smiths, but none will work without pay. The Lannister vaults in Casterly Rock remain sealed. My sister saw to that before she burned." The words fell like embers. Tyrion scarcely blinked, though a tremor rode his breath. Jon took the parchment. "We will levy no new taxes this year. Then we will have no city this year. Then we build with our own hands." Jon moved to the window. Moonlight drew silver roads across the Blackwater. "Call the lords to court. Not to kneel, but to labor. We begin with the Red Keep. If they see their king laying stone, they will lay stone." Tyrion stared as though glimpsing some distant folly. At length he smiled, crooked and tired. "Stubborn snow. Very well. I shall draft the invitations. Come break your backs beside his grace. They'll love it." Bah! By the second fortnight, word of the new king's humility had drifted beyond the Crownlands, carried by sparrows and sellsword tongues alike. At the Crossroads Inn, a Northman and a Dornishman nearly came to blows over who had wept harder, hearing that stark honor now sat the throne. In the Godswood at Winterfell, Sansa paced beneath red leaves, letter to Jon clutched but unsent. She had sworn the North free, yet her brother's crown tugged like a silent tide, one that threatened to pull her people once more into the South's fevers. In Old Town, Archmaesters debated whether children born this year would be called of the Snow Age, for winters do follow summers, and the wall may stand, but the name of a king is a warm cloak in cold times. Within King's Landing the slow work began. Brienne supervised haul after haul of rubble clearance, white cloak grayed by dust. Tyrion's ledger pages grew stained with sweat, yet he found coin hidden in overlooked dungeons. Old Tyrell tributes never recorded, molded bars stamped with roses. Davos oversaw their melting, forging them into nails, hinges, door handles. The rose rebuilds, he called the effort, and in it lay a sliver of poetry to balance the mundane stink of molten metal. Jon joined them at dawn, passing buckets, hauling beams, barefoot upon charred floors still warm within. Those who saw him did not cheer. They watched in silence, uncertain how to address a king swinging a pick beside them. But by sundown, they matched his rhythm, and benches once broken began to look like benches again. Nighttimes he spent with parchment and ink, hand cramping around words he never thought he'd write. Letters to Sansa, apologizing for crowns laid heavy on northern hearts. To Gendry, now Lord of Storm's End, offering him a place in a council dedicated to roads spanning from Dorne to the Wall. To Queen Nymeria Sand, though no such title existed, asking what peace might look like for Dorne, now that the Spear Tower stood empty of princes. He wrote to Bran in Winterfell, though ravens rarely returned. The boy king who was not a boy withheld answers in cryptic silence. And every night, after the candles guttered and the spiders crept from cracks to claim the silence, Jon dreamed of snow. Snow drifting in the throne room, softening iron edges, covering blood trails that once led to a slain queen. He woke before dawn. Always, heart hammering, palms still feeling the heat of a blade he had driven. On those mornings he walked the battlements until the sky paled, seeking ghosts who no longer answered. Trouble arrived on a clear noon with no fanfare. A handful of Golden Company remnants, their elephants sold, their pay vanished with burned contracts, had turned marauder on the King's Road, shaking coin from merchants heading north. Brienne reported the attack, eyes dark. Peasants slain, wagons torched. They call themselves the Gilded Brotherhood now. They seek ransom for the king's hide. Jon read the report beside the cracked skull of Balerion in the dragon pit, wind humming through ribs of shadow. "I will ride," he said. Tyrion protested. "You ride, and half the court rides after. Leave the monsters to Balerion's bones. A handful of sellswords is not a dragon to slay." But Jon remembered the Brotherhood without banners, remembered Thoros' songs, and Beric's eyes lit by fire. A king who sits while his roads burn is a king in name alone. "They will see what crown leads the realm now," he said. He chose no guard but Brienne and Grey Worm, the Unsullied's presence both shield and symbol. They rode at dawn with a dozen City Watch volunteers, fresh recruits who had never worn the cloak of gold before. Wind carried the scent of grass and distant river. Jon breathed it like a freed man. They found the sellswords camped at a ruin south of the Trident, gaudy banners fluttering above broken stones. The parley was short. Jon dismounted, helm tucked beneath his arm. "There is no gold for brigands. Lay down arms, take pardon, or face northern justice." The captain laughed, a rasp seasoned by too much wine. "I fought for queens and lost. I'll not kneel to a bastard king who murdered his bride." It took only moments. Brienne's sword flashed, Grey Worm's spear danced, recruits forming a ragged line to hold the panicked sellswords. Jon's own blade, the Valyrian steel of home ice reforged as Blackclaw, moved as though guided by the old gods. When the dust lifted, the Gilded Brotherhood was no more. Those surrendered were bound, rations shared with them, wounds tended. That night they camped beneath torn banners snapping in gentle wind. Jon stared into the small cookfire while Brienne sharpened her blade. "Word will spread," she said. "Some will see your mercy, others will see weakness." "Let them," Jon murmured. "Fear forged that throne. Let them reckon with something else." "She." Grey Worm watched him across the flames, inscrutable. When moons rose high, the Unsullied commander spoke at last. "You swing no chains for killers." His tone held neither accusation nor praise. Jon met his eyes. "I kill when needed," he said. "And I forgive when needed." Grey Worm's gaze did not waver. "In Neath, we will build gardens, not gallows. Perhaps your peace will reach us there." It was the closest to approval Jon expected. He nodded once, grateful for small mercies. Upon their return, they found the Red Keep humming with news. Yara Greyjoy had sailed up the Blackwater with 5 longships, flags striped black and sea green. The Iron Queen waited in the throne room, hair braided tight, a bronze axe slung across her back like a promise. She bowed to no one, yet she stood before the throne with a curious respect, if respect it was. Jon stepped down the dais, boots echoing. "Stark," she said. "I heard you'd sooner haul fishnets than wear crowns." "Crowns rust," he answered. "So do nets." She grinned, teeth flash white. "I come for the Iron Islands debts. Old Robert named them Rebel years ago. You want peace? Wipe the slate." "Stick." Jon studied her. The scent of salt and smoke clung to her black leathers. "Swear no reavers will raid mainland coasts for 7 years. Your men fish, trade, no pillage. Do that, and your debts are gone." Yara's laughter startled the lingering courtiers. 7 years? Ironborn with idle axes turn them on one another. "Then they will learn new trades," Jon said. "Or lose their debts and keep their axes dull." She weighed him, eyes sharp as broken glass. At last she spat on the floor, a sailor's oath, and clasped his forearm. 7 years, she agreed. But when the terms end, I expect feasts. When the terms end, we will feast together. Tyrion scribbled. Sam sealed the accord. Davos muttered something about untrustworthy squid, but his eyes shone. In the days that followed, other envoys arrived. From Highgarden came soft-spoken knights offering seed grain and vine cuttings to replace orchards burned beyond the city. From the Stormlands came Gendry Waters, now seated as Baratheon with the stroke of Jon's earlier quill, bringing barrels of fresh-forged nails and a shy smile that betrayed his pride. From Dorne came Nymeria Sand, veiled in pale silk, eyes like the dawn over the Red Mountains. She brought nothing but a question. What is peace to you, Stark-turned dragon? He answered her not with declarations, but with a walk through the still healing streets. She watched silent crowds part before him, saw children offer him soot-spun yarn. When they reached the Ash Market, where vendors now sold bread rather than bones, she turned to him. Peace, she whispered, is a seed you water with tears and sweat, I see. She left a single desert rose on the baker's stall before departing, promising to speak for Dorne's allegiance. On the 17th day of his reign, Jon climbed the hill of Rhaenys at dusk. Across the ruins of the dragon pit, dusk swirled like violet smoke. He stood alone, save for Ghost, the great white direwolf silent at his side, eyes ember red, under the falling dark. Ghost had arrived that morning with the northern column, leading them like a pale sentinel. Seeing the wolf again, Jon's heart clenched with something between grief and joy. Now they watched the last sliver of sun bleed across Blackwater Bay. Beneath his boots, burnt bones of dragons lay buried. A shiver traveled through him. Those creatures had once embodied might beyond mortal measure, and yet even they had fallen to betrayal, time, and grief. He wondered if his fragile experiment, this fragile peace, would fare any better. Ghost nosed his hand, a low whine echoing. Jon knelt, burying fingers in thick fur. I know, he murmured. Winter is never gone for long. From below drifted faint music, fiddles and pipes in streets half rebuilt. He closed his eyes and listened. The song was off-key, a little drunk, and altogether human. It spoke of new roofs and mended sails, of children chasing dreams beyond rubble. It was not the roar of dragons nor the thunder of armies. It was, perhaps, the first note of the age he hoped to shape. Yet threats coiled still. Word from the east spoke of a Selsail fleet gathering under a shadow-crowned banner called the Crimson Dawn. Rumors in the north told of wildlings raiding umber holds, driven south by an unnatural chill, racing down from the shivering sea. In Old Town, gray-robed archmaesters studied red-streaked comets falling beyond the summer isles. And in the Riverlands, a lone monk named Tormund preached of a fire that would cleanse the false king in snow and sorrow, both. Jon read each raven's note, felt the weight of them settle like frost on his shoulders, but he did not yet move warily. Peace was young. Like any child, it would be tested, bruised, but it must be allowed to learn to stand before he shielded it too fiercely. That night, returning to his chambers, he found another letter, this sealed with black wax, the sigil unmarked. Inside, a single sentence. The song did not end with fire, nor shall it bend to snow. Beware the shadows that still dance. No signature, no threat. Yet it crawled cold up his spine. He placed it in the brazier. The parchment burned quickly, curling like a dead moth. Summer crept over the crownlands by increments, flowers pushing through soot-filled cracks, vines twining up charred portcullis teeth. Jon hosted open courts thrice a week beneath what remained of the Queen's ballroom, now roofless, its floors strewn with wild heather. He sat not upon a throne but a simple high-backed oaken chair, Tyrion to his left, Sam to his right, Brienne and Grey Worm behind. Farmers came seeking seed loans. Tailors asked for tariffs lowered on Essosi silk. A troop of mummers petitioned to rebuild the Dragon Pit stage for plays celebrating survival itself. The king listened, often silent, and when he spoke it was seldom in decree but in questions. How many hands to lift stone? How much silver to mend nets? What do you need, truly? Some left puzzled by his simplicity, but many left with new hope, pinned like a brooch to their gowns. One dawn, As sea-misted breezes rustled the broke banners of the keep, Sansa Stark rode through the Lion Gate at the head of 200 northern riders. She dismounted in the courtyard where Ned Stark's blood had once stained the cobbles, and she gazed up at the red keep with eyes as unyielding as winter's first ice. Jon met her there, clasped her gloved hand. No words passed at first. Siblings who had borne wars needed silence to measure the distance tragedy lay between them. In the great hall she addressed the small council, voice clear. "The North remembers," she said, "and the North stands apart, yet it does not forget its kin. I come to observe this peace you offer, and to ensure Northern blood is not the mortar binding Southern stones." Jon nodded. "No blood shall bind stones again. Sit with us, guide us." She sat, though an invisible chair of independence remained around her. They spent hours debating rivers, roads, walls. She argued that the wall might be garrisoned once more by volunteers rather than outcasts, a shield of pride rather than punishment. Tyrion smiled at the idea. Sam agreed, noting White Harbor fishermen already volunteered timber. Jon approved, heartwarming. His father's realm rebuilt not upon fear but on honor freely given. When evening simmered, Sansa found Jon alone, amid the godswood transplanted from Dragonstone, a small heart tree freshly rooted by the carpenters. She pressed her palm against the trunk. "Does this place suit?" she asked. "It's young," he said. "Roots shallow yet, but they'll deepen." She looked at him, eyes glistening with quiet worry. "So must yours." He understood. "I walk the line between union and solitude. Some see me as Stark, others as Targaryen." He stared at the heart tree. "Perhaps I am only Jon." She smiled sadly. "Perhaps that is enough. But kings rarely have the luxury of being only themselves." By midsummer solstice, 3 moons since his coronation, King's Landing breathed again. Bakeries sent sweet scents through streets once clogged with smoke, and the laughing children had grown into gangs of apprentices hauling mortar. Yet for every wall raised, another rumor rose. The Crimson Dawn fleet now boasted 30 ships. Dornish raiders claimed the stepstones in Nymeria Sand's name, though she denied it, and word from Braavos whispered of faceless men stirring at broken contracts of old. Jon convened the council in the newly mended Hall of 9, so dubbed for the 9 long tables that replaced the single table of the old throne room. "We cannot chase every shadow," he began. "But shadows left unchecked may merge into storm." He proposed envoys, one to Pentos to parley with the Crimson Dawn, one to Dorne to confirm Nymeria's loyalty, one to the Wall to survey the unnatural chill. Sansa volunteered for the Wall, Davos for Pentos, Brienne for Dorne, her oath to the realm now wider than any single king. Jon agreed, though his heart tightened releasing them. Tyrion stayed, scribbling. Sam remained to manage ravens, Grey Worm to oversee training of a new city guard. On the eve of their departures, Jon joined Davos at the harbor. Blackwater waters lapped gentle against wooden pylons, still being replaced. The Onion Knight leaned on a post, eyes scanning the half-moon. "Peace is like an onion itself," he said. "Many layers. Beneath each, another tier." Jon chuckled softly. "You always find the right metaphor." "Years at sea," Davos shrugged. "Sailors know layers. You peel far enough, you find the heart, small, steady, worth protecting." Jon clapped his shoulder. "Return with the heart intact." "If the sea allows," Davos replied. As the sails unfurled, Jon felt the first real pang of loneliness he had known since Ghost's loss at Hardhome. Different now, sharper because it was voluntary. He let it settle. A king must learn to rule both presence and absence. It was in this hush of midsummer progress that the first true test came. A raven from Old Town, wings frayed with haste, bore news of a plague, red fever, spreading upriver from the Reach, carried by refugees fleeing burned farmlands that dragons had seared in their final flight. Maesters suspected the sickness would reach King's Landing within a fortnight. Panic threatened to crack all freshly laid mortar. Jon summoned Sam, Tyrion, and the city's healers beneath torchlight. "Close no gates," he said, "else fear becomes famine. We build quarantine camps outside the city walls along the dry rush. clean water from the Riverlands aqueduct, set bakers to bake flatbread that can travel. Anyone showing fever signs goes to the camps, not the gutters. Sam nodded, notes flying beneath his pen. Tyrion frowned. Tents, food, healers, costs we barely meet. We divert stone from new courtyards to build infirmaries, Jon replied. A courtyard can wait, a life cannot. He spent nights supervising the healers, Ghost pacing at his side. The wolf's presence calmed some, others fled, superstition claiming dire wolves carried the north's chill. But as the fever crept, Jon remained. He hauled water, lit pyres for the dead, spoke with farmers whose entire kin lines had bled within days. He wept only once, alone, washing another body, a boy of 8 who might have been the lad who gave him yarn. When his tears fell upon the fevered brow, they sizzled softly against skin nearly flaming. Tyrion found him hours later, face ashen. The city sees, he said. They see the king break beneath the same weight. Jon wiped his cheeks. They must see, else they forget we share the burden. Within 3 moons, the fever waned. Camps burned in controlled pyres, ashes scattered at sea. The city breathed and did not choke. The people spoke of a king who stood amid their sickness and survived. Legends sprouted quick. Some said he could not fall ill, that the blood of the dragon burned disease away. Others said the direwolf devoured the sickness. Jon ignored all. He slept for 2 days, silent forms of council members keeping vigil outside his chamber. When he woke, Sam delivered ravens. Davos' envoy to Pentos had parleyed with the Crimson Dawn, securing a tentative pact. They would turn pirate heralds to royal merchants, if granted legal trade routes in Westeros. Brienne's mission found Nymeria Sand's Stepstone raiders were local cell sales using her name. Dorne remained loyal, sending citrines and figs as proof. Sansa's journey north, however, revealed unnatural storms lashing the Shadow Coast. Something stirred in the far, forgotten wastes. Jon read those letters at dawn, light catching the still healing scabs on his knuckles. Peace, it seemed, was a field forever needing tilling. He laid the parchments aside, called for fresh parchment. His words flowed slow and deliberate, seeds placed one by one. He asked Sansa for more eyes, more ears. He requested from Davos the names of Crimson Dawn captains to weigh their vows. He asked Brienne to escort Nymeria north, forging bonds between sand and snow for the winters ahead. And he penned a final letter, one yet unsent, addressed simply to Bran. "Brother," it began, "I feel the winds you once heard. Guide me where I cannot see." He paused, quill hovering, then wrote, "I will hold the wall within my heart even if its stones crumble. When I breathe for all of us." He sealed it, not with wax but with twine, a simple knot. Simplicity had become his armor against the iron weight of history. The moon of that autumn rose early, full and copper, like spilled wine across the sky. In the rebuilt amphitheater of the Dragon Pit, the Mummers' play debuted. Jon sat among commoners, cloak plain. The play told of a lone wolf who became a dragon, not through fire but through sacrifice, who tamed a kingdom with bread instead of swords. It was crude, the costumes patchwork, the lines stumbling, but the roar of laughter and tears carried strong. When the play ended, torches flared, and the crowd turned, pointing. They had recognized him despite the plain cloak. Ghost's white form beside him, impossible camouflage. Jon stood, heart pounding. A hush fell. No cheer, no chant, just thousands of eyes reflecting torchlight. He bowed his head, not as king greeting subjects, but as man thanking others for sharing hope. Slowly, hands lifted. Fingers touched hearts, then extended outward, as though offering their chests to him. It was a gesture born that night. The heart salute, Sam later named it. The people's vow to guard the peace as fiercely as any king. Jon left the pit in silence, ghost at heel, tears threatening again. But these tears were not sorrows, rather the ache of something beginning to heal inside him, daring to beat. That winter never came in earnest. Snow dusted the Red Keep only once, then melted by noon. Flocks of cranes circled the blackwater flats where once ash had clogged the river. In those mild days, the king prepared for harsher ones. He expanded granaries beyond the mudgate, funded by reach grain tariffs. He decreed a scholars' guild within the city, where any child, noble or small folk, could learn letters on benches carved from fallen dragon bones, polished smooth to a gleam. Grand Maester Sam championed the project, calling it the Silent Citadel, for learning grows strongest in calm. And there were nights John stole away to the quietest tower, where ravens nested around broken windows, and wrote lists of names he must never forget. There in black ink, Daenerys Targaryen, Ura, Mormont.I, Ed and Gren and Pip, lost brothers, Ygritte. Lyanna Mormont.I, his father Eddard, his mother, unknown. And once, he added his own, Jon Snow, half expecting the list to end him when ink dried. But he drew a line through that name and wrote, beside it, just a simple word. Here. He closed the ledger and felt Ghost's muzzle at his knee. Dawn was near again. Roosters crowed faint. Another day, another grain of sand added to the fragile walls of peace. He rose, stretched, and descended the tower steps. The throne awaited. But so did the baker's stall, and the masons lifting the last keystone over the sept's new door, and the scribes copying laws into plain tongue for any to read. Each of those tasks was the throne, he now understood. Iron could break bodies, living hands might build futures. In the courtyard he found children already at play, chasing one another past cracked pillars. One small boy clutched a spindle of gray yarn looped around his wrist. The same, perhaps, or another like it. John knelt. "Where did you find that?" he asked. "A little girl gave it," the boy said. "Said it means rebirth, means the king will keep us safe." John looked up at the dawning sky, pink as fresh petals. "Then keep it," he said softly, "and keep her words." The boy smiled, then ran, yarn fluttering behind him like a small, determined banner. Jon Snow, once a bastard in black, watched him go. The Iron Throne waited in the hall, but he wondered if, in truth, it was here, in these stones, these children, these trembling beginnings, where the real throne lay. He turned, footsteps light despite the crown's weight, walking back into the warmth of a city daring at last to call itself whole. Enya. The hour before dawn wrapped King's Landing in a colorless hush, the river below the walls unmoving as polished tin. In the scriptorium of the Silent Citadel, candles guttered behind leaded panes while Grandmaster Sam bent over a folio sent from Winterfell the previous dusk. The wax seal was Bran's, white as frost, stamped with a weirwood staring face, and its message, though spare, had roused every small hair along Sam's arms. He read it again beneath the weak flare of tallow. When the last green leaf falls onto the still water, the river will remember its name. There was no signature, but there never was. Sam pushed spectacles higher on the bridge of his nose, weighed the parchment's chill implications, and blew on his numb fingertips. Bran's riddles had grown darker with each raven. This one smelled of distant ice and something older. A chill that did not flee the hearth. He folded the page carefully and hurried into corridors that smelled of lime wash and fresh ink, his soft steps echoing between new plastered arches. Torchlight fluttered against murals half complete, scenes of wheat harvests, of children reading beside wolves and dragons, rendered without fangs or flame. He found the king on the eastern ramparts, already awake, already working. Joan's sleeves were rolled to the elbow. A mason's mallet rested in his left hand, its head flecked with dust the color of bone. Ghost prowled nearby, white fur ghostlier in the moon's last gleam. "Bad news?" Jon asked without turning, as if Bran had whispered the answer on the wind. Sam offered the letter. "I think so, but I think it's more warning than news. Something coming south." Jon rayed, brow creasing. "He writes of rivers. Winterfell stands well inland." "True, yet the White Knife is swollen already." Sansa wrote as much, and Umber outposts report sea ice drifting into the shivering sea by midsummer. That should be impossible. That should be impossible. John laid the parchment against the Merlon, where starlight struck it square. The wall may be down, but the world still turns. If the cold moves south again, we must be ready. Sam swallowed. Supplies hold for a year at best. We'd planned on modest winter. Then we plan on more. Joan's gaze traveled over rooftops warming to faint peach light. Call council after first bell. And write Sansa, ask if Bran will speak plain even once. Sam nodded, already cataloging tasks. He hurried away, robes flapping. John lingered, letting the river smell. Salt tar, faint hint of new lilacs from garden terraces. Steady his pulse. Ghost padded to his side, warm flank against his calf. Still we chase ghosts. John murmured into the freshening breeze. The de-wolf let out a breathy huff, as though to answer yes. Till all are laid to rest. Council assembled where the Sept's outer shell had become a cloistered court. Tyrion arrived chewing dried apple, ink splattering one cuff. Davos bustled in, smelling of seaweed and tar. Brienne escorted Nymeria Sand, newly come up from the south in orange satin, trimmed by polished steel plates. Sansa's chair remained empty, her retinue still in the north, but her letters lay neatly stacked, sealed in gray. Grey Worm took position behind Jon, not as bodyguard alone, but as silent sentinel of unfinished debts. Jon discussed Bran's riddle, the swollen rivers, the streaks of crimson aurora reported over Skagos 2 nights past. Silence greeted him, pensive, uneasy. Then Nymeria spoke first, voice honey over steel. Dorne has never feared winter, yet our wise women read portents. Sands cool at dusk faster this year. Our scorpions find deserts teeming early with locust, unnatural cycle. If your north freezes again, cold rides the winds we share. Nathordontor. It may be nothing, Tyrion offered, though doubt pinched his eyes. The old histories speak of freak summers and sudden snows alike. Yet if ice truly creeps south, grain stores must triple. Without dragons, we have only windmills and mule trains. Dragons burn as well as warm, Davos muttered. Best not rely on beasts we buried long ago. Jon clasped hands. We expand granaries. Reach ships still ferry twice monthly. We ask Lord Garland to increase sailings before harvest. And pay him with what? Tyrion asked. Labor rights again, Jon said. Let Reach folk settle Crownland's fallow since the burnings. 500 families, first allotment. Davos, draft the grant. Davos inclined his head. Happy to, if the city watch can keep the peace between old tenants and new. His eyes flicked toward Grey Worm. Might be need of unsullied patience. Grey Worm's face remained stone. We protect those who need. So be it, Jon said. Now to Bran's warning. If rivers freeze, barges stall. We must finish the King's Road repairs before first frost. Brienne sat forward. My men can ride north tomorrow. We'll clear brigands along the Trident, conscript laborers where feasible. Howl. Take 20 of the Unsullied, Jon said. And Nymeria, if you will lend your spear. Nymeria Sand's smile curved. A Dornish lady riding north to chase winter. My sisters will laugh for decades. I will go. Tyrion folded arms. Our king strips his walls again. What if the Crimson Dawn fleets prove fickle? Then I greet them at sea, Davos said. Their captains trust me. I'll sail on black tide within the fortnight to inspect their new mercantile efforts. If they play pirate, we end bargain. Jon met his gaze. You will not sail alone. Never do, Davos said. The river's mouth bristles with our new tall ships. Good training for lads green to deck. Discussion turned to mundane ledgers, kilns for roof tile, tunnels to divert stormwater from the city's lower rings, the silent citadel's need for more parchment. But beneath each civic item, a quiet pulse of worry beat. When adjourned, they scattered to tasks in silence that felt louder than any horn. In the weeks that followed, King's Landing worked like an anthill unsettled by a curious boot, yet stubbornly alive. Masons double-timed along the King's Road, overseen by Brienne's firm patience and Nymeria's playful, goading whistle. South of the city, fields turned gold under midsummer sun, and small folk began placing scarecrows, dressed in black leathers, tiny tributes to the Night's Watch reborn as wardens of peace. John spent days among them, traveling incognito as plain Jonas Rivers. He helped mend fences, listened to fears of coming chill, and told stories of winters past when hearth and neighbor made the strongest walls. At night he returned to the Red Keep to read Bran's next raven. The leaf has fallen, yet the water lies still. When you hear the rivers sing, follow. Cryptic as the first, but heavier. Tyrion wagered it spoke of the neck, marsh whispers of boughs drooping early, of frogs silent beneath too cool air. Sam argued it hinted at the trident's forks. John dreamt instead of the Blackwater Bay blanketed in fog so thick ships rode by ear alone. In those dreams, a woman with silver gold hair stood on a mirrored surface, beckoning him to look beneath. He always woke before he could kneel. A month after Bran's second note, Sansa returned, cheeks windburnt, eyes bright with driven snow. John greeted her in the Godswood courtyard, where imported heart trees were finally turning deep crimson at their veins. They spoke in hushed voices, among falling leaves that smelled faintly of resin. "Bran sees something," she said without preamble. "He would not name it but asked me to bring this." From her satchel, she produced a small parcel wrapped in wolf-gray wool. Within lay 3 polished dragon-glass arrowheads, black as the space between stars. John rolled one between fingers. "Caves at Dragonstone are empty. Castle Black had a cache forgotten behind the kitchens," Sansa said. "Bran claims the glass may matter again." His jaw clenched. "He foresees things circling back. The last war never ends. It only sleeps." Sansa tucked hair behind one ear. "You built wonders here, John, but the north feels colder already. Frost fell on last hearth during harvest calendars. If we cannot hold winter at bay, your wonders crumble." "We will hold," John said, though he felt the dragon glass biting cold. "Stay," advised the council. "The north needs your voice in every plan." "Benhra." She nodded but added, "I hope these walls are not so high the wind forgets their cracks." News from Davos arrived on raven wings trimmed in red wax, crimson dawn colors. The fleet had accepted terms. Trade routes in exchange for renouncing piracy, their leaders pledging fealty on coiled parchment. Yet a final line chilled Tyrion's wine when he read it aloud beside John. "Their admiral inquires whether the king remembers the smell of ash upon snow. He sends a gift as reminder." The gift arrived 2 days later. A chest of cedar bound in brass. Inside, a small iron crown glimmered, scorched black, worked in shape of 3 dragon heads twisted downward. Daenerys' crown, or a clever replica, burned near molten along its inner rim, as if plucked from a pyre. Jon's pulse hammered. Tyrion swore softly. Sansa flinched. Sam traced an absent circle over his heart. Grey Worm stepped forward, face shuttered, and asked only, "What justice?" Jon closed the lid. "None. Not yet. They test us. We answer with calm." "But this is threat," Grey Worm insisted. "And they expect rage," Jon said. "We will give scrutiny instead. Davos sails home already. When he returns, we question every dawn, Captain. If flame remains in them, we snuff it." Dengar. That night, Jon could not sleep. He paced his solar until silver pre-dawn slid through narrow lancets. Memories stirred. The taste of smoke on his tongue when he plunged the blade into Daenerys' breast. The scorching breath of Drogon above. Ash-like black snow swirling so thick he could not see the Red Keep's spires through the flurry. The crown in that chest felt like those moments nailed to iron. He half wished to fling it into Blackwater's depths, half to place it on his own head until its heat branded him properly. Instead, he set it on a plain stone table, covered with brown cloth, and instructed guards to admit no one save Sam or Sansa to that room. Ghost watched from a corner, golden eyes unblinking. Jon knelt, pressing forehead to the direwolf's thick ruff. "I will not be taunted," he whispered. Ghost whined low, a vow echoing in fur and breath. Autumn's first storm struck 2 weeks later, sweeping from the sunset sea in a single raven-dark wall. Merchant carriers tacked for harbor, but the pressure drop came too abrupt. 7 foundered on shoals north of Dragonstone, masts shearing like stalks. Lightning clawed the clouds purple, jagged bolts that split tall ships from spar to keel. From the bluff above the mud gate, John watched sails vanish in curtains of rain that stank of brine and something metallic, coppery, as though the sky bled overhead. Brienne's road expedition rode in that same eve, bones weary, packs soaked, but alive. She reported roads cleared, but soldiers bore tales of strange lights flickering over marshes at night. Blue-white ghosts weaving through threads, leaving frost prints behind even in early autumn. And Nymeria's Dornish retinue spoke of ice-laden hail falling near Maiden Pool large enough to punch holes in leather awnings. John dispatched Sam to gather elders who remembered omens from the long night's lore. The Grand Maester returned pale. One crone from Crack Claw Point claimed the sky had cracked before the Dawn Age in just such a storm. Tyrion adopted pragmatic dread. If the heavens intend to break open, I'd at least like a roof intact above my wine racks. He tripled shifts in the city's tileworks. Roofs glistened terracotta red by the next fortnight. Meanwhile, Sansa sent ravens to every northern holdfast. Store salt meat early, fletch arrows by the thousand. Send spare hands south to help harvest Crownland's grain. Lords Manderley, Karstark, Glover answered. Lady Lyanna Mormont could not. Bear Island remained eerily silent. A later raven dripped salt water on Sam's sleeve. Its scroll said only, "Ice moves upon the shore. Have courage, cousin." No seal, but the penmanship belonged to a Mormont shipwright Sam once studied with. Amid spreading foreboding, a smaller miracle sprouted along the dry rush camps. The Red Fever survivors, once shunned, had formed a guild of healers. Led by a shy reachwoman named Peah Flowers, they opened simple tenements where herbal poultices and boiled linen awaited any too poor for maesterly fees. John visited one damp afternoon, cloaks spattered with river mud. He found children crushing willow bark, while veterans taught bandaging to lowborn girls who would never dream of citadel chains. Peah curtsied awkwardly, offered him a cup of something bittersweet smelling of mint and memory. "We called ourselves Embers," she explained. "Fire nearly took us. Now we glow." John drank, heat unfurling beneath ribs, banishing chill that windy day clung to bone. "You glow bright," he said, smiling. He left with a promise of stipend, only a few hundred dragons each half-year, but enough to ensure the embers burned steady even if greater storms blew lanterns out. That night, with Peah's tea warmth still in him, John dreamt again. The river from his nightmares sang a lullaby of ice cracking, and the silver-haired woman waited upon its surface. But when he reached her, she did not extend a welcoming hand. Instead, she lifted the scorched crown from the box, settled it upon his own brow, and whispered, "Peace is forged in fire and shatters in frost." John woke soaked in sweat, fingers clawing at his forehead as though to snatch off metal no longer there. Ghost loosed a low growl, then pressed close until John's trembling slowed. In early frost month, Davos' flagship broke the horizon, its sails patched but proud. Crowds gathered at the quay, dockworkers waving, bell ringers primed. Yet, as the black tide drifted closer, watchers spotted a black and copper pennon flying inverted. A distress signal. Davos disembarked gaunt, beard salt-flecked, and limped straight to the throne hall where John awaited, flanked by Grey Worm and Sansa. "Crimson Dawn broke covenant," Davos rasped, bowing stiffly. "Half their fleet sailed west from Pentos after I left, but not for trade. They'd taken the Arbor, burned Vintown docks, hold Redwine twins ransom. They wield cell sorcerers too, conjuring storms unnatural. Redwine sent word by Gull. Arbor could fall entirely. Deyimani?" Tyrion's face drained. "The Arbor's vineyards anchor Reach wealth. If they hold them, the Reach cannot feed us." Davos nodded. "Their admiral is one Vaelzar of Korth, calls himself Stormcaller. The crown they sent was message," Grey Worm said flatly. John stood. "Ready the royal fleet. Davos, summon every captain." He turned to Sansa. "You oversee the city while we sail. Your council is Sam, Tyrion, and Peah Flowers." Sansa did not argue, though worry flashed. We won't fail you. He faced Grey Worm and Brienne. You sail, both of you. Tyrion, draw terms to free red wine hostages, should we retake the arbor. Offer leniency for Dawn sailors, who surrender peacefully. Tyrion arched a brow. Your mercy outpaces our stores of rope. Mercy buys loyalty cheaper than rope, Jon said. But take rope too. Preparations consumed 4 days. Grain loading paused. Blacksmiths hammered rivets through midnight, forging spearheads tipped in dragonglass. Jon's order at Sansa's urging. If iceborne horrors stirred, he would not meet them unarmed at sea. The strange cargo unnerved sailors, who whispered that the king expected whites to rise from waves. Jon did not correct them. Better to sail with healthy fear. He left Sansa his signet, and instructions that the Embers Guild answer to her in dispensing medicine. Ghost remained by her side, though the direwolf whined when he sensed separation. We both must guard her, Jon said, ruffling the wolf's ruff. I'll feel your eyes on the wind, old friend. Ghost nipped his gauntlet softly in farewell. The royal fleet. 31 ships, half cobbled from captured Dawn hulls, half newly built, slipped into mist before dawn, banners snapping. Jon stood on the forecastle of the Queen Nymeria, named at Nymeria Sand's mischievous suggestion. Brienne commanded the White Oath off starboard. Grey Worms unsullied manned the spear decks of the Unsung Promise. Davos captained his beloved Black Tide, sails patched with onion sigils gone brown from age. Tyrion, to none's surprise, remained ashore, claiming seasickness. He stood waving a white kerchief from the ramparts until fog swallowed view. Past Dragonstone, the winds stiffened, driving them southwest toward the arbor. Stars vanished behind boiling cloud fronts. At night, static sparks danced along rigging. Sailors muttered that sorcery rode the air. On the third night, a chorus of eerie creaks sounded from the hull, as though the ship herself voiced unease. Lantern light made faces gaunt, water reflections flickering like spirit hands across planks. Near Old Town's latitude, a sudden calm replaced the storm. Sails sagged dead. The sea glimmered a sickly green, the moon bruised behind sheeting haze. Then a sound rose, distant at first. Whale song, sailors thought, until rhythm clarified. Drums, but not of wood and hide. Metal perhaps beaten in slow heartbeat cadence. Brienne joined Jon at the prow. Enemy music, too vast for shipboard drums. Jon answered. Grey Worm silently knocked arrow, eyes scanning horizon. From the hush, shapes emerged. Hulks of shattered vessels adrift, masts snapped, hulls scorched. They bobbed like corpses in oily swell. No crew visible, only tatters of sail, some bearing dawn's red sun's sigil, others plain. Between wrecks drifted black shards of obsidian, larger than arrowheads, jagged as cleaved mountain glass. Jon ordered grappling lines readied. Boards clacked as sailors dragged a splintered dinghy close, its interior coated in rime frost despite warm sea air. Brienne touched it. Ice refused to melt against her glove. Stormcaller conjures more than wind, she muttered. Cry from the mass pool. Lights dead ahead. Lantern rings clang. The Queen Nymeria's beaked prow cut the fog sudden, revealing the arbor's north point. But its vineyards glowed red, not green. Swaths of torch fire marched along terraces. Farther seaward, silhouettes of tall ships ringed the harbor mouth, oars shipped, catapults armed. Between them drifted a colossal barge crowned by iron spires crackling with pale lightning. From the spires, arcs leaped to the waves, turning water momentarily to pillars of steam. That's no Dawn build, Davos shouted across to them in speaking trumpet. Looks a Sosi war engine. Could crack hulls from half a league. Nesh said. Lightning spat again, striking sea. A wave of unnatural cold swept the fleet. Breath steamed, ropes frosted. Jon's dragonglass spearheads hummed as if drinking the chill. Then came a voice, magnified across water, neither male nor wholly human. A hiss like wind raking through chimes. Kneel, bastard king. Bring me your wolf's head and your iron crown. I will give you snow's mercy, swift and cold. Crewmen looked to Jon. He straightened, shouting back without amplification but with voice that carried over silent sea. "I kneel to none who burn vineyards and chain children. Lower your weapons, and the realm will judge you with law." Laughter rolled, a booming, disembodied cackle. The war barge's spires flared, twin forks of lightning stabbed outward. One found the white oath, mast exploding in shards. Sailcloth ignited. Brienne's crew scrambled, cutting rigging. The second strike speared a Dawn prize ship in Joan's second line. Hull split. Men hurled screaming. Grey Worm's archers loosed in return, volleys of dragonglass-tipped shaft. Black arrows arced luminous, each carrying small flickers of violet light that glowed against the unnatural storm. They clattered along enemy hulls, but one struck a spire. Glass shattered in flash of blinding blue. The lightning lattice dimmed briefly, sputtered. "Again," John ordered. The Unsullied drew and fired, a ripple of deadly onyx. 2 more glass bolts struck the barge's rigging, and a mast toppled. Sparks died. Amid confusion, Davos signaled the left flank. 3 galleys rowed at sprinter's speed for the harbor mouth. Rams poised. Dawn ships scrambled to block, but currents shifted bizarrely. Dyes swirling circumvented their hulls, as though some force parted sea for Davos. The black tide slammed into the nearest Dawn galley, splintering oars. Grapples flew, boarders poured. Davos himself, too old for such foolishness, still wielded cutlass, carving a path toward a red sun standard. John kept the Queen Nymeria angled into grim wind, drawing arrow after arrow from the barrel at his feet. Grey Worm fired with him. Each time dragonglass met lightning spire, the storm's hum faltered. Brienne steered her broken-masted ship parallel, her knights firing crossbows. Sailors shouted that frost clung to their beards, yet sweat poured down inside tunics, hot and cold at war along their skin. Lightning surged again but feebler, bolts lancing wide. John saw through spray a figure atop the barge, robed in copper-scale armor, arms outstretched, hair floating as though underwater. The air about him writhed with heat shimmers and ice motes both. Stormcaller, no doubt. "Cut toward him," John commanded. The helmsman, a Crownlands fisherman pressed into service, paled but obeyed. Gulls screamed overhead, swirling in chaotic patterns, as if netted by invisible cords. The spires on the war barge suddenly bent inward, lightning ceasing. Stormcaller lowered arms. In that stillness, Joan's heartbeat sounded thunderous. Then, a new vibration tremored the deck. Low resonant, like an ancient horn, water between ships bulged. From its center rose something monstrous, a pillar of dark ice shaped nearly like a human, yet towering thrice mast height. Its surface rippled with trapped shadows. There and gone. Sailors fell to knees. Some screamed prayers. The ice giant raised a translucent arm, and at its gesture the sea congealed around Davos galley, freezing water into sudden clots that seized keel, flipping vessel onto side. Men toppled, cries muffled by water and ice. John felt the dragonglass arrows vibrate. Instinct moved him. He seized the thickest, fitted it into a heavy ship ballista. Brienne's knights had fixed upon forecastle earlier. Grey Worm pivoted the weapon while John steadied cable. Brienne's crippled ship drifted closer, her own ballista aligning. "Now," John hissed. They fired. Black bolt streaked, trailing faint violet glow, lancing the giant's torso. A crack splintered. Steam hissed. Brienne's bolt followed, punching near the first. The ice giant's chest, spider-webbed, fissures glowing blue-white. It let out a sound not audible but felt like inner ear bursting, then collapsed into shards that hissed into mist before they touched sea. Stormcaller let out an audible cry, pain or rage. Lightning flickered anew, but jagged, uncontrolled. His own spires began to melt, copper cheeks warping under sudden heat. Dragonglass apparently cut his magics at the root. John sized another bolt. "End him," he growled. Noise swallowed the command. Tidal roar as waves crashed from the shattered giant's wake, slamming dawn hulls. The war barge listed. Archers loosed again, bolts hammered. One found Stormcaller's shoulder. He staggered. arms flailing, and a pulse of dark fire erupted from his core, sweeping across deck. Crew burned in seconds, leaving silhouettes scorched on planks. But the spire behind him collapsed, crushing him beneath twisted iron. As their master died, dawn ships faltered. Some tried to flee, others, commanderless, drifted. Unsullied boarders took hull after hull, with minimal killing. John ordered surrenders granted safe hold. Grey Worm relayed commands ringing calm through carnage. Davos survived, yanked from freezing water by a sailor with arm tattooed onion sigil. He coughed seawater onto John's boots, muttering, "Told you rope's no match for mercy or dragonglass." His lips blew, but eyes twinkled. By sunrise, Arbor's harbor smoked with wreckage, but no longer enemy. Vine terraces still burned in patches, yet small folk dragged buckets and bucket lines before dawn prisoners, even bound sails. Red wine heirs, bruised but whole, were freed from a citadel cellar. They knelt before John, offering casks of finest sweet wine as thanks. He bid them stand, promising instead barrels be sent to the city's orphanages when harvest healed. They buried Stormcaller on a barren point where vines had all crisped to ash. No rites, only dragonglass scattered atop the cairn like unblinking eyes. Grey Worm drove the final shard deep. Sea winds wailed among rocks eerily akin to voices. Victorious fleets limped home weeks later, hulls tar-patched, crews weary yet alive. King's Landing greeted them with lantern festivals newly minted, a tradition Sansa started while Jon sailed, releasing paper lights over the Blackwater to honor the living who fought afar. Thousands floated now, mirrored by the river in shimmering constellations. Jon walked the quay, hood back, letting warm candles smell erase burned vine scent, still clinging clothes. Ghost bounded beside, children squealing at sight. Sansa met him under a garlanded arch. "We feared the worst. Storms past for now," he said, "but Bran's waters may yet remember more." She led him to the Godswood courtyard, red leaves ankle deep. Sam waited with new parchment. Bran's third raven. When the river sings, the wolf must howl, or ice will drown its voice. The meaning no clearer, but urgency dripped like meltwater. Sam added another note. Ravens from Bear Island brought reports of blue flames flickering along shorelines at night, fish freezing mid-leap in sea spray, and embers of northern watchfires spoke of shapes beneath the ice, vast forms sliding below turquoise frost. Jon exhaled. Stormcaller was tip of spear. Something pushes others. Winter of enemies. Sansa murmured. "Perhaps," Jon said. "But summer of hope continues here." He glanced toward lanterns drifting skyward. "We'll hold both truths at once." They stood silent as paper stars lifted, each flame a fragile vow. In their glow, Jon thought of Daenerys again. Not the tyrant some labeled her, but the dreamer who once spoke to him of breaking wheels, of freeing worlds. Peace, he realized, was her wish turned inside out. Same fabric, different weave. He hoped wherever her soul rode on wind, she saw they stitched with gentle hands now rather than fire. Snow arrived early, small flurries that melted on cobbles yet spoke volumes. Farmers rushed final gleaning, bakers stocked cellars. The ember spread south, opening hostels along roads. Tyrion opened crown vaults to fund them, remarking that coin can be minted anew, lives cannot. On the 20th day of first snow, a delegation from the free folk rode through the King's Gate, led by Tormund Giantsbane himself, beard whitened, eyes merry. He greeted Jon with crushing hug that smelled of pine pitch and frozen ale. "Frost's biting up there," Tormund said. "Not normal cold, ghost cold. We lost hunters to cracks in ice forming straight lines, like someone took a sword to the earth." Jon convened instant mood in the silent citadel's long hall. Free folk described auroras turning blood red, beasts twisted by frost, and a haunting sound at night, a river singing in a tongue none knew. Bran's prophecy sang through each account. Sansa listened, knuckles white. Sam scribbled, linking dates. Finally Jon addressed them. "The realm stands one. Walls of stone or law mean little to winter. I ask free folk to join this fight with southern kin." Tormund grinned wide. "Thought you'd never ask, Crow King." With that, lines drawn in countless ages blurred. Unsullied exercised beside then warriors in the bone field. Dornish knights taught spear dance to small folk militias. Maesters hammered dragonglass onto arrowheads across from wildling tanners curing mammoth hide for cloaks. King's Landing became crucible once more, but tempered now by mercy rather than hate. All the while, Bran's River waited. Jon studied maps nightly, searching for confluence of waters and winds. He combed archives for songs referencing rivers that sang. A blind bard from the Westerlands offered clue. Legends of the sighing sea, where subterranean waters under the neck sometimes echoed like flute. Jon dispatched rangers. Yet deep inside he suspected Bran's song might be metaphor. An echo in men's hearts when courage met despair. Howl then to keep voice clear, his brother said. And so Jon did howl, though softly. New edicts for fairness, new songs taught in marketplaces, new feasts where highborn and lowborn sat mixed. Each little act, a howl of shared humanity against gathering ice. As midwinter's eve neared, Jon stood again on the ramparts he had helped lay stone by stone. Snow dusted the parapet, catching moonlight in prisms. Below, the city's avenues glowed with torch rows forming a wolf's outline. A festival Sam coined Night of First Howl, where children sang to call spring safely home. From the harbor, bells joined chorus, and farther inland horns answered. Wolves beyond city walls howled back, a long note that swelled inside Jon's chest until he felt ribs vibrate. Ghost beside him tipped muzzle skyward and loosed his own deep-throated song. Jon joined, not with words, but with breath shaped around the sound of belonging. Across leagues, he fancied Bran heard, and the rivers bent momentarily in deference, ice staying its advance for one heartbeat. When the echo faded, Jon wiped moisture from lashes. He sensed presence, turned. Sansa watched, cloak wrapped tight. "We sing together," she said. "North and south, high and low. Perhaps that is the answer." "Perhaps," he echoed. "Or perhaps the fight yet sharpens." She smiled faintly. "We will meet it." Snowflakes touched her red hair, then melted. Jon looked upward. Clouds parted, revealing a swath of stars brighter than any night since the war. Against their silver calm, a single comet traced horizon, burning blue. It pulsed thrice, then faded beyond sight. Jon's hand tightened on the rampart stone. He did not know whose omen that comet bore, ice or fire, but he felt within its trail a promise that whatever dawn rose next would demand both strengths he held inside. The wolf's loyalty, the dragon's flame. He closed eyes, breathed cold air, and listened. Somewhere distant water kept silent, for now. But the city behind him thrummed with mills, with laughter, with hammer strikes forging instruments of nurture and of defense both. Each sound another stanza in the river's coming song. Each heart another voice ready to answer when the notes began. And among those voices, Jon Snow's would not be the loudest, nor the softest. But it would be steady, tempered by ash and guided by snow, and it would stand until the last leaf touched the water and beyond. Because peace, like winter, was an endless season only the patient could survive. Long before dawn, cold fog wound its way through the alleys of King's Landing, lacing the city's bones with a hush that seemed half born of reverence, half fear. Even after so much rebuilding, the city remained raw, a tapestry with its threads showing. Torn banners stitched together atop new stone. Spires rising beside foundations scorched by dragonfire. In this early hour, the only true warmth came from the heart of the Red Keep, where Jon Snow stood alone in his solar, bent over letters from every corner of Westeros. On the desk lay missives sealed with the sigils of half the realm. Tormund's bold scratch declared that wildlings had seen blue-eyed things roaming the haunted forest, drifting north and east, wary, never lingering in one place. The Manderleys sent word that White Harbor had frozen over before the last full moon, trapping dozens of ships in ice so thick that axes shattered trying to break it. From the Eyrie, young Lord Robert's regent begged for aid as winds howled over the mountain passes and food grew short. Each letter brought more questions than answers. And beneath it all lay Bran's last raven. More cryptic still. When the river's heart is silent, even the old gods must learn anew how to speak. Jon rubbed the back of his neck, then turned to the window. Ghost rested his muzzle on the sill, his breath misting the glass. Jon scratched behind the direwolf's ear, wishing for the 1000th time that he understood the mysteries his brothers seemed to weave with every word. The old gods had never spoken plainly to him, only through wind, water, and the ache of loss. A faint rap sounded. Sansa entered, carrying a tray of warm honey bread. She set it on the table and poured 2 mugs of bitter tea, the only luxury they had not rationed. "You haven't slept," she said. It was not a question. He shook his head. "I keep waiting for word from the south or the wall, or something more than riddles. Every day the ice draws closer. Even the stepstones see frost on their beaches now. He trailed off. Sansa leaned forward, her gray eyes so like their mother's. "You're not alone, Jon. Whatever this is, whatever comes next, we'll meet it together. The North stands ready. The city too. But we can't ask for a sign and then refuse to act while waiting for certainty." "Lin and na." He smiled, thin and fleeting. "Father would have known what to do." Sansa shook her head. "No. Father would have done his duty, whatever the cost. So will you." She paused. "Let me read to you what Lyanna Mormont sent." She drew a letter from her sleeve, its seal barely clinging after the long, cold journey south. "To King Jon, the wolf dragon. If ice is moving, so are we. Bears never sleep when the world grows cold. Our young hunt in pairs. We have lost 2 to what they call the river's ghosts. Blue, silent, tall as oaks. Not whites. Not men. Something new. They flee when touched by fire, but flame alone does not kill. You have the dragon glass. Send more if you can. And send a word. What do we fight? Lyanna, of Bear Island." Jon ran his thumb along the paper's edge. Something new. His thoughts spiraled back to the arbor, to the stormcaller's conjured giant, the shattering ice, the sense that even as they won one battle, another wound in the world had opened. There was no Night King now. No unified mind directing these terrors. Or if there was, it wore no crown of bone. Sansa read his face. "This war might not have a head to cut off, Jon. We may have to fight it on every front at once." He nodded, setting his jaw. "Then that's what we do." Throughout the city, preparation became rhythm. Axes and sickles sharpened, dragonglass embedded in every spear, arrow, and even kitchen knife. The embers trained anyone willing. Mummers, bakers, orphans. Paya Flowers established open tents outside the city walls, where lessons in wound binding and basic surgery ran from dawn to dusk. The city's masons erected crude barricades at every gate and bridge, not to keep out the living, but to delay whatever might come through the river if all else failed. Maester Sam coordinated a council of knowledge in the silent citadel's sunken library. There, scrolls as old as Old Town itself lay open beside the work of living scribes. Sam led debates on the nature of the river's ghosts, pitting wildling tales against the science of maesters. Some said they were spirits called by broken magic. Others, that they were the spawn of the last Night King's despair, his cry echoing down centuries through stone and ice. None could be certain. Meanwhile, Tyrion ran the city's supply lines like a war campaign. New coins minted from Tyrell gold. Trade deals struck with every free port from Braavos to Lys. Ships bearing the wolf and dragon sailed under letters of safe passage, bringing dried cod, honey and salt pork in exchange for Queen's Landing's famous glassware and Dornish dyes. He joked to Jon that peace and panic buy at the same price these days, but Jon could see the exhaustion in his eyes. Every new cargo ship was greeted as a blessing, every rumor of pirates, a knife to the city's throat. On the 12th night after the first great frost, word came that the white knife had frozen all the way to its mouth. Sansa gathered the council in the great hall, where the new heart tree stood at one end, red leaves trembling in a draught that smelled of snow. Gendry Baratheon, now Lord of Storm's End, spoke first. If the rivers are gone, so are half the roads. If the ice holds through first thaw, King's Landing will be cut off by spring. We have stores for 1 year. After that, nothing but faith. Lionel. Nymeria Sand crossed her arms, gaze fierce. Dorne can send grain by ship, but if the stepstones freeze, even the southern passage will close. We must plan for siege, even if no army comes. Tormund, freshly arrived from the Neck with a band of free folk, pounded the table. We never relied on your roads or your walls. We can teach your soft ones how to live on less. Mushrooms and rat stew save more of my kin than any fattened larder. Brienne nodded. Then we'll listen. We'll learn. Every person able should train for both spear and survival. Sam added, we need more dragon glass. The old mines at Dragonstone may still hold some, but we'll have to send a party. And soon. Jon listened, taking it all in, weighing each voice. Then he spoke, not loudly, but with the authority that had become his without ever asking for it. If this is a war with no enemy to parley with, then our defense must be everywhere. We do as Tormund says, every city, every holdfast, must prepare to live off the land, defend their walls, and share what little they have. No hoarding, no gold spent on feasts or games. He turned to Sansa. Send word to every bannerman. Tell them what we know and what we don't. Offer what aid we can and ask what we need. We stand together or we fall alone. Sansa met his gaze and nodded. Sam, gather a party for Dragonstone. Brienne, take whomever you trust most. Gendry, coordinate the forges. Every smith in the city answers to you now. Nymeria, I need you at the docks. The Dornish are our lifeline. Protect those ships with your own life if you must. Nennin. He paused. And Tormund, you and the free folk train every able hand in city and countryside both. The first one who laughs at their ways spends a night in the cells. I don't care who they are. Tormund's grin was wide and wicked. Aye, Crow King. We'll make wildlings of your lords yet. The meeting broke. Jon lingered with Sansa beneath the heart tree. Both of them silent. The wind rustled red leaves, and for a moment, Jon thought he heard his father's voice. When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. He hoped that would prove true now, when all of Westeros seemed little more than a pack huddled against a storm. Days blurred as the cold deepened. Sun rarely showed more than a pale gleam behind thick clouds. The city slowed. No laughter from the wine sinks. Few songs in the streets. Instead, quiet industry ruled. Children fetched wood. Women boiled soup in cauldrons big enough to drown a pig, and men built fences or sharpened iron. The only joy came in the form of lanterns hung at dusk, their colors chasing away the gloom. Jon made his rounds in plain wool, never the kingly black. He walked markets and alleys, offering words of hope and the labor of his own hands. Most people were too tired to gape, but some pressed small tokens into his palm. A carved wolf, a twist of dried flowers, a scrap of paper with the old god's prayer. These gifts he kept in a box beside his bed. Ghost followed everywhere, more symbol than sentry. Children vied for a chance to pet the dire wolf's thick fur, until Jon made a rule that whoever brought fresh kindling for the healers could stroke Ghost's head for luck. Soon the city's woodpiles overflowed, and Ghost grew tolerant of sticky hands. Brienne's party left for Dragonstone by sea, 12 strong. Among them was Podrick Payne, grown broad-shouldered, his voice steady as Brienne's own. They sailed with a company of city watch, hoping the old tunnels beneath the volcano would yield more black glass. Jon watched them go, his heart clenched with both hope and dread. Sam, meanwhile, continued his studies. He consulted wildlings, septons, and hedge wizards. Some believed the new ice creatures were drawn to sorrow, or old blood, or perhaps the sound of the rivers themselves. Others said the last magic of the old Night King seeped into the land, warping everything it touched. Sam wrote it all down, his notes growing thick with speculation, theory, and desperate hope. Tormund's free folk became local legends. They taught the city's children how to spot rabbit tracks, skin a coney, and sleep under blankets sewn with wildling runes. Sansa organized monthly feasts of sharing in every district. No one ate until every neighbor had a bowl. This, more than any edict, bound the city together. Nymeria's Dornishmen guarded the docks with a ferocity that soon earned them a new nickname, the Sun's Wolves. Every ship that made it through the now dangerous southern passage was greeted as if it bore the sun itself. By night, Nymeria led her spear maidens in patrols along the city's edge, searching for signs of ice or shadow. On the 5th day of deep winter, the first river ghost came. It began as a rumor. Fishermen who swore the river sang at midnight. A voice as high as a flute but colder. The city's night watch doubled its patrols along the black water, but most believed it a tale to explain the frostbite on unlucky drunks. Then, a patrol vanished near the old ferry dock. At dawn, the embers found 3 men standing waist-deep in the frozen river, eyes wide and mouths open, blue-black with cold. No wounds, but their hair was threaded with hoarfrost, and their hands locked as if they'd tried to hold each other against whatever had come for them. Sam examined them himself and reported that their hearts had stopped, not from fear or drowning, but as if frozen from within. That night, the city's nerves broke. Some called for flight, others for sealing the gates forever. Jon refused both. Instead, he stood atop the mud gate with Brienne and Nymeria, Ghost at his side, and called the city to listen. His voice was raw, nearly breaking, but it carried over the wind. I have seen what comes with winter. I have seen what it takes from us and what it leaves behind. But I have also seen the strength of those who stand together. Free folk and lord, healer and smith, child and elder. We do not run. We do not hide. We fight together, and we survive together. No matter what comes through the night. He stepped down, and Sansa took his hand, her own trembling only a little. If you believe it, so will they, she whispered. That night, as the lanterns burned and people huddled in prayer or song, Jon walked the city's edge, Ghost padding silent beside him. He thought of every person who depended on him, every soul who had put their trust in this fragile peace. He thought of Daenerys, too. Her dreams of a better world dashed against the reality of war. He promised himself that this time, if peace shattered, it would not be because he failed to try every path, to save every life he could. The following days were a race against cold and fear. Brienne returned with wagons full of dragonglass, enough to arm the city's defenders 3 times over. Sam distributed what he called river torches, candles mixed with powdered black glass, which burned with a strange purple flame. Peya and her embers mounted them at every crossing, every alley, every bridge. On the 7th night, the river sang again. This time, the defenders were ready. Brienne led a company to the ferry dock, armed with dragonglass blades and river torches. They found a shape on the ice, tall, faceless, blue and white, and shifting like water. It did not move toward them, but every man and woman who looked at it felt their hearts stutter, their limbs grow heavy. Brienne advanced alone, Oathkeeper gleaming, torch held high. The river ghost retreated before the light. It hissed, a sound like steam on snow, and vanished into the fog. The next morning, the ice at the ferry dock had melted to slush. No one knew if the river ghost was destroyed, or merely fled. But hope returned. Jon ordered every household to keep a river torch burning at night. A city of light can outlast any darkness, he said. It became a new festival, Night of the Singing River, where every street shone violet and the embers led songs until dawn. Winter deepened. Supplies held. Just. The city learned to live in scarcity, but never despair. The first true thaw arrived late, when the trees budded with frost instead of flowers. Jon climbed the city walls with Sansa, Brienne, and Ghost. They looked north, where the land still slept under a pale shroud. He wondered how long it would last, how long they could keep this fragile peace alive. Bran's final raven came then, landing on the heart tree itself, its feathers rimed with frost. Sam read the note aloud as the council gathered in the great hall. The river's song is memory. Its silence is forgetting. If you remember who you are, who we all are, the heart will thaw, and peace will grow roots as deep as winter's bones. Then maybe. No one could say if that was prophecy, warning, or blessing. But Jon felt its truth. He looked around at his council, at Sam, Sansa, Tyrion, Nymeria, Tormund, Gendry, Brienne, at the survivors, the healers, the wildlings, the children born in the cold and learning how to hope. The pack, still together. Then we remember, he said softly. And as the seasons turned, the rivers slowly ran again, and the city, battered but alive, entered its new age. Not an age without fear, or sorrow, or cold, but one where peace was not merely the absence of war, but the presence of hope, of kindness, of memory carried forward by every hand that had shaped these walls, rebuilt these bridges, and lit a lantern against the dark. The song of the river changed, and so did the world it passed through. And through it all, Jon Snow, king, brother, survivor, walked the rebuilt stones, never forgetting, never resting, always ready to howl back at the night, for as long as he, or peace itself, could last. Dawn bled through the clouds over Blackwater Bay, a pale and uncertain light turning the river's lingering ice to silver glass. In the city, bells rang for the festival of new roots, a day marked now not for any god or conquest, but for the simple, stubborn fact of survival. In every district, river torches burned low, and children sang the old gods' hymns, their high voices echoing over the rooftops. King's Landing, for the first time in a year, felt not besieged, but expectant. Jon Snow walked the ramparts in a wool cloak, dark with melting frost, Ghost at his side, the wolf's muzzle flecked with new scars. Below them, the city was stirring. Smiths already at their forges, fishermen hauling battered nets from ice-rimed boats, bakers prodding cold ovens to reluctant life. Jon paused to watch, hands gripping the stone. He let the cold seep through him, anchoring him in the here and now. Each breath a gift after so many months, when each one might have been the last. He was not alone long. Sam joined him, wrapped in 3 layers and with a new maester's chain gleaming over a patched surcoat. His cheeks were chapped and pink with wind, but his eyes were alive with purpose. "It worked," Sam said, meaning not one thing but all the things they dared. The river torches, the granary reforms, the shared feasts, and the relentless preparation, the alliances between people who once spat at the thought of sitting in the same room. The river's song changed. The old magic's still out there, Jon, but it's quieter now, like it's listening to us for once. Jon nodded. It's not just magic. It's us. We remember. We adapt. We don't give up. He looked at Ghost, the wolf's red eyes wise and tired. The hard part isn't fighting the cold, Sam. It's carrying the peace we made through the thaw. Sam smiled. I think you'll manage. Together, they walked the length of the wall, watching the city come alive. Tormund's wildlings were butchering a stag in the square outside the mud gate, giving lessons to southern boys on how to skin it without wasting a sliver. In the Crown's market, Nymeria Sand's spear sisters handed out dried apricots and figs to a line of orphans, their laughter rising above the clatter of horse hooves. Pea flowers led a train of embers up the street of steel, buckets of warm broth balanced on their heads, while Tyrion barked orders at a wagon driver who was blocking a bridge with a broken axle. It was not a city at peace, not entirely, but it was a city with hope. And Jon knew that was more precious than gold. In the great hall, Sansa presided over the council. She sat at the table's head, red hair bound with a circlet of new forged silver leaves. Her eyes were tired, but her smile was fierce as any blade. The North's thawing faster than we feared, she reported as Jon took his place beside her. White Harbor ships broke free 3 days ago. Lord Manderley's already sending grain south and requesting more wood for repairs. Gendry, freshly arrived from Storm's End, nodded. My forges are busy, but we can spare some axes and saws. I'll send 2 wagons north with the next convoy. Nymeria leaned forward, her brown eyes sparkling. The Dornish ships are already halfway to Old Town. The Arbor's recovered enough to trade wine for next year's festival. There are even rumors that the Stepstones might turn green again. If we keep sending grain and peace. Tormund grunted. If you can keep the wildlings from drinking the Arbor's best before it reaches the city, I'll eat my own boot. The council laughed, and Jon let it roll over him. For a moment, He was not king nor warrior, but only a brother at the family table. Brienne cleared her throat. The dragon glass stores at Dragonstone are nearly depleted. We've armed every holdfast and village we could reach, but we need a new source, or we risk being unprepared for whatever the river brings next year. Mendermuntar. Sam nodded. I've written to the citadel. There are rumors of more black glass in the Shadowlands, and in the caves beneath the Frostfangs. I'll send envoys if you approve. Joan's fingers tapped the table. Do it. We prepare for peace, but we remember the cold. Never again will we be caught unready. Tyrion, ever watchful, lifted a cup. A toast, then. To a new year, to a city reborn, and to the wolf who would not bow. He caught Jon's gaze and added, quietly enough for only Jon and Sansa to hear, "May your peace outlast your scars." They drank, even those who took only water or weak beer. It was not a royal court, not truly. It was a gathering of survivors, each one changed by what they had endured, yet still reaching for the next morning together. As spring deepened, Jon rode the kingdom with Ghost and a handful of guards. He visited the Reach, where Lord Garland Tyrell greeted him with fields already emerald, and Lady Alysanne of the Westerlands showed him the new irrigation canals her miners had dug with free folk labor. In Old Town, he stood beneath the high tower with Sam and the Archmaesters, sharing what they'd learned about the river ghosts and the ways the land was healing. In the north, he knelt in the Godswood at Winterfell, the ancient heart tree's face weeping sap that glistened in the dawn. Sansa walked beside him, arm in arm as they'd done when they were children. The north was slower to thaw, but its people were already clearing the fields, mending boats, and teaching the old ways to a new generation that had never known true peace. At Bear Island, Lyanna Mormont met him on the beach, her arm in a sling from a recent skirmish with what she called the last of the blue-eyed bastards. She gave him a carved bear's tooth and told him, "If you ever need us again, send for me." The North remembers, but so do we. He rode south again, stopping at every village and farmstead. He listened to their stories and watched their children at play. He drank their sour beer and slept on straw, sometimes in silence, sometimes with a song in the air. He never wore his crown, and often he went unrecognized, except for Ghost's steady presence at his heel. By the time he returned to King's Landing, the city was awash in green and gold. Vines curled up the broken columns of the old sept, and every window was thrown open to catch the warm breeze from the river. Jon took to holding open court beneath the heart tree in the Godswood, now in full leaf. Small folk brought grievances, petty thefts, disputes over water rights, arguments about boundaries reclaimed from the receding ice. He listened, judged, and always urged compromise first. When forced to pass sentence, he did so with mercy, remembering every lesson learned on the wall and in the snow. One day, a woman came before him, her face hidden by a rough hood. She knelt, then raised her chin to meet his gaze. Her eyes were a gray so pale they seemed almost white. "You do not remember me, my king," she said softly, "but I'm one of the spearwives who once hunted you north of the wall. When winter came, I fled south. Now I have children, and they have known only war and hunger." Debjan. Jon recognized her, not by name, but by the stubborn angle of her jaw. He nodded for her to continue. "We want to stay. We want to help. But many still look at us as enemies, not kin." He stood, beckoned her forward, and placed his hand on her shoulder. "Anyone willing to build this peace is welcome. You are kin now, teach us what you know. And if any man says otherwise, send them to me." She bowed, tears bright in her eyes. Word spread quickly, and soon more wildlings, broken men, and refugees from the wars joined the city's work crews and farming parties. In every district, the lines between north and south, highborn and low, became blurred, replaced by the bonds of labor and shared survival. As the year turned, the city marked the anniversary of the thaw with another festival. The embers led a procession from the gates to the river, scattering flower petals and lighting new river torches. Children wore crowns woven from willow and grass. Bakers shaped loaves in the likeness of wolves and dragons. Ghost, now graying at the muzzle, walked at Joan's side, to the delight of every child in the city. At dusk, Jon stood before the heart tree with Sansa, Tyrion, Brienne, Sam, and Nymeria. The council was larger now, with voices from every region and every people. He spoke, not as a king, but as one among them. This peace we've made is not a thing of swords or treaties alone. It is a promise, one we keep every day, in every field we plant, every child we teach, every hand we offer to a stranger. We are the memory of those who came before us, and the hope of those who will come after. Nanapur. He paused, letting the silence settle, as the first stars appeared above the city. We will not forget, not the cold, nor the war, nor the price we paid. But we will remember too the courage it took to build something new. And we will carry this peace forward, not as a shield against the world, but as a light to guide us through whatever darkness may come. The crowd answered not with cheers, but with a silence full of trust, a hush deeper than any prayer. Years passed, each marked by challenges and renewal. There were bad harvests and raids from desperate men. There were fevers and floods. But the kingdom endured. Jon grew older, his hair streaked with gray, but he remained as steadfast as the city's walls. Ghost's muzzle whitened. His steps slowed, but he was always there, a silent guardian of the peace his master had forged. Sansa ruled the north with wisdom and a fierce love for her people. Under her, Winterfell became not just a seat of power, but a beacon for the free folk, and every house that remembered what it meant to serve not just a lord, but a land. Sam became the first Grand Maester to found a school in King's Landing where any child could learn their letters, girl or boy, highborn or smallfolk, wildling or Dornish. Peya Flowers led the embers across the realm, her healers as trusted as any knight. Gendry's forges shaped plowshares as often as swords. Nymeria Sand sailed south to Dorne, then returned each year for the thaw, bringing news, trade, and sometimes a new song. Tormund never settled, but the wildlings he trained became wardens and guides, their knowledge saving hundreds in the harsh winters that still came, though never as fiercely as before. Brienne rebuilt the Queen's Guard into an order of knights, as humble as they were brave. She took squires from every background, and under her, the oath of service meant more than any noble birth. Tyrion, ever the wit and cynic, became the city's chief advisor. He grew a vineyard on the slopes above the Blackwater, and claimed that in his old age, he preferred the company of grapes to politics. Though he never truly retired from council. Jon walked the city every day, never as king, but always as himself. Children greeted him by name. Bakers gave him fresh rolls and news of their sons. At every market and field he listened. Sometimes he judged. Sometimes he simply sat in silence and let others speak. He never remarried, though there were offers and rumors enough. Instead, he poured himself into the life of the city, into the slow, stubborn work of keeping the peace he declared. Each year, the festival of new roots grew larger. Each year, the city's walls sprawled outward, not as fortifications, but as open arms. Where once dragonfire had burned, gardens now flourished. Where once the river froze, children swam and laughed, their songs echoing beneath the willows. And when, at last, Jon grew old and his steps faltered, the city did not weep. They remembered. They gathered in the Godswood, beneath the heart tree, whose roots reached deeper with each passing year. Sansa spoke first, then Sam, then Brienne and Gendry, and all the rest. Each told a story, not of war, but of hope. Not of a king, but of a friend, a brother, a man who had given them back the world. As dusk fell, and the river's song drifted through the city, they lit the lanterns one by one. And in every home, in every heart, the memory of Jon Snow, his quiet strength, his stubborn hope, his simple promise, burned brighter than any crown. Peace endured, not as an absence, but as a presence. A living thing. The song of the river was their song now, and as long as they remembered, the heart would never freeze. The pack survived, and the new age was theirs to shape, day by hard-won day, as long as hope endured. Until Winter's memory never truly faded from King's Landing, even as years slid one into another and the world changed its face. In the shadows of the rebuilt Red Keep, saplings rose tall where dragonfire had once scorched earth and stone. Summer and autumn passed with gentle moderation, as if the realm itself understood that harshness had no more place in this land, not after all that had been endured. Jon Snow found himself becoming a man of seasons. He marked the calendar less by wars and banners, more by when the first river ice melted, when the wildflowers crept over the Queen's Road, when children's laughter returned to the market squares and did not sound like a borrowed thing. Yet the shadows of his choices lingered, just as the chill in his bones remained when the wind blew from the north. He no longer wore the crown, except for high festivals. It gathered dust in its carved chest, silver and iron dulled with the passing years. The people called him king still, but not with fear or awe, rather with a familiarity that made his name part of daily speech. Jon said, "The king's justice, Snow's peace." These were phrases mothers used when scolding children, merchants when weighing a fair measure of grain. It was not the legacy of Aegon or Robert or even Eddard Stark. It was something quieter, and in its way, harder to keep. His court was made up of the friends and kin who had survived with him. Sansa, now Lady of Winterfell, still a voice at his side. Sam, first Grand Maester to open his school's doors to all. Tyrion, who sometimes appeared more merchant prince than counselor, but whose mind never ceased to serve the realm. Brienne, who rode farther afield each year but returned with new squires and stories of justice. Done in far village. Ghost, old and battle-scarred, spent his days in the Godswood, basking in patches of sun, and his nights patrolling the city's outer roads. Even as the Wolf's Gate grew stiff and his muzzle silvered, his presence remained a promise. That some things endured no matter the turning of the world. Spring broke over the city in a riot of color. Vines clambered over walls that had once bristled with murder holes and iron spikes. Flower stalls overflowed in the market squares. Banners snapped in the wind, not with the colors of war but in patchwork. New sigils, new families, the blended arms of North and South, Wildling and Dornish, Reach and Vale. Jon walked the streets at dawn, unnoticed except by those who sought him. His hair streaked with gray but his stride steady, his gaze soft. On such a morning, a group of children cornered him by the smithy. They were muddy, grinning, out of breath from some frantic game. One thrust a wild bouquet into his hands, a tangle of bluebells, crocus, and winter roses. "It's for you," the smallest said. "Mother says you brought spring." Jon knelt, his knees creaking. "Spring comes because you're here to greet it, not because of me." Another piped up. "But you kept the cold away." He ruffled her hair. "No one can keep winter away forever. All we can do is live through it, and make sure there's something left to grow when it's done." They giggled and scattered, their laughter trailing back up the winding lane. He stood and inhaled the scent of earth and blossom, feeling for the first time in years that he might have given these children something he'd never had. A world unbroken, at least for now. At the city's heart, the Godswood flourished. The heart tree, its face older and kinder in the sunlight, grew thick with leaves. Sansa joined him there most mornings, her own hair now threaded with silver, her eyes bright as any girl's but deepened by a life of careful rulership. She sat on the bench he had built for her, wrapped in a cloak of white and gray. "Did you read Lyanna Mormont's letter?" she asked. Jon nodded. "She wants us to visit this summer. The cubs are all grown. She says Bear Island's never been more alive." Sansa smiled. "The world seems determined to reward us with second chances." He glanced at her sidelong. "Do you regret it, Sansa? The cost?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "I regret only that peace is never easy to keep, that it is won and lost 100 times in a lifetime. But I do not regret that we tried, or that we are still trying." He squeezed her hand. "That's all I've ever known how to do." They sat in silence for a while, listening to birdsong and distant laughter from the city beyond. Summer brought its own challenges. The crimson dawn, shattered by the defeat at the arbor, splintered into a dozen smaller pirate bands that preyed on trade from Lys and Volantis. Nymeria Sand led patrols along the coast, her ships flying both sun and wolf. She wrote to Jon, "Piracy is like wildfire, best checked early, lest it grow beyond any one king's reach." In the west, House Lannister, what remained of it, petitioned the crown for return of certain lands, arguing that peace meant mercy even for the proud. Tyrion rode to Casterly Rock and brokered a compromise. Gold for rebuilding the crownland's new titles for Lannister kin, who agreed to swear loyalty to Jon and Sansa. No one spoke openly of the old debts, but neither did they forget. In the Reach, Lord Garland Tyrell's bounty was threatened by a blight. Gendry led Smith south to forge new plowshares and irrigation tools, helping to save the harvest. In exchange, the Reach promised grain for every city on the King's Road, binding north and south not just by law, but by bread and trust. Jon visited each region in turn, never with an army, always with gifts and open hands. He listened to grievances and resolved disputes with a gentle firmness that became legend. He met children named for Sansa and Arya, for Ghost and for Daenerys, even for Sam and Tormund. Every village held some small festival for his arrival, not out of fear, but pride. The kingdom became less his to rule, and more his to guide. At night, he wrote long letters to Bran, who ruled beyond the wall in silence and mystery. Bran's replies were spare, sometimes riddles, sometimes simple sketches of a snowflake or a green sprout, sometimes a single line, "The river remembers." Jon kept these in a locked box beside his bed. As years passed, the embers became an institution as trusted as the maesters. Peoflower's red-haired daughters and their students traveled from Old Town to the Neck, healing wounds, teaching new medicines, and carrying messages from village to city. They discovered an old grove near Blackhaven where rare herbs grew, the seeds of which they spread across Westeros. Thanks to their work, fevers that once felled hundreds in a season now passed as minor ailments. Sand's school expanded, its doors open to every child with a will to learn. Girls read beside boys. Orphans and lords' sons solved sums together. Sam's daughter became a scholar of rivers and tides, and her discoveries helped tame floods that once ruined harvests. Brienne's knighthood became the highest honor in the realm. Her squires spread the ideals of justice and service to the farthest hamlets. She herself rode less often in later years, but she presided over trials and witnessed more peace than any lord in living memory. Gendry never lost his love for the forge. His sons and daughters, some by marriage, some by adoption, carried the Baratheon name into a new age, one where skill and loyalty mattered more than birth. He was content, and for all his roughness, he was revered. Tormund and his wildlings never grew entirely tame. They roamed the wild places, guiding lost travelers and patrolling the far north for signs of old threats. Tormund's legend became a source of jokes and awe in equal measure. Nymeria Sand, always restless, established a network of couriers and informants that kept the peace as much as any city guard. She adopted children left orphaned by war, teaching them to ride and fight and love with equal passion. Tyrion aged with wine and wit. He wrote histories, some scandalous, others full of quiet wisdom. He lived to see his name redeemed, and died surrounded by friends. His last words, a joke about his own grave. Jon's greatest joy and deepest sorrow came with each passing festival of new roots. Every spring the city gathered in the Godswood, the heart tree blossoming above them, petals drifting like snow. Children ran through the grass, singing old songs and inventing new ones. Every year, the faces changed. Babies grew into young men and women. Elders passed on. New hands joined the work. One spring, Ghost failed to rise from his place beneath the heart tree. Jon found him as the sun rose, breath shallow, eyes distant. He sat with the wolf as day brightened, stroking his fur, remembering every battle, every silent promise they had shared. When Ghost's last breath came, it was gentle. Jon wept, not as a king, but as a man who had lost his oldest friend. The city mourned. They buried Ghost beneath the heart tree, his grave marked by a simple stone and the carvings of 1,000 children. Flowers were piled so high that for days the gods' wood smelled like summer fields. John did not speak to the city that week. Instead, he walked alone, letting grief have its season. When he returned to the heart of the city, the people greeted him not with cheers, but with a respectful silence. He stood before the heart tree and spoke only a few words. What we love, we must one day let go. But what we remember lives on. In the years that followed, the festivals took on new meaning. Every lantern set afloat on the river was a promise to remember, not just ghost, but every loss, every hope, every lesson. As old age crept into his bones, John grew quieter, more thoughtful. He spent his days in the company of Sam's grandchildren, teaching them to ride and to hunt, to read and to lead. He rarely sat the Iron Throne. When he did, it was to resolve a matter too weighty for others. Mostly, he ruled from the gods' wood beneath the branches that had witnessed so much. He grew to love the city's new music, lutes and drums, flutes and horns, voices raised in harmony instead of in warning. He listened to stories from distant corners, of a spring that never failed on Bear Island, of a village in the Dornish marches where wildlings and reach folk lived as neighbors, of a new settlement at Hardhome, thriving under free folk leadership. Every so often, Bran's ravens arrived, sometimes bearing only a single feather. John learned to read the changing world in the flight of birds, the rise of the river, the way the heart tree's leaves curled before rain. On the last night of his last winter, he sat beneath the tree with Sansa and Sam. The city lay hushed under a late snow. Sansa was gray-haired and dignified, her face lined but her eyes as keen as ever. Sam's beard was white, his hands spotted, but his mind clear and gentle. John watched the snow drift down, settling on the branches, the grass, his own knees. He closed his eyes, breathing in the silence. He heard, just as he had in childhood, the old god's voice. The pack survives. He smiled, and felt Sansa's hand in his. Sam began to hum an old song, one he'd learned from Gilly long ago. The sound wound around John like a warm blanket. In the morning, the city awoke to a world bright and clean. The heart tree's branches arched overhead, heavy with frost and promise. The river ran free, its song the same as it ever was. Changed, yet unchanged, shaped by the memory of all it had seen. Joan's body was found at the roots of the tree, his face peaceful, his hand resting on the earth. Word spread through the city, the north, the world. There was mourning, but there was no fear. The pack endured. They laid him to rest beside Ghost, beneath the heart tree, in a grave marked only by his name and a single line. He remembered. Spring returned. The city bloomed. New rulers came and went. But peace, once kindled, did not die. It was kept alive by each generation who taught their children to value memory and mercy, to fight when they must, but to hope always for the thaw. Legends of Jon Snow grew, but none greater than the simple truth. He had loved, he had lost, he had loved, not with fire and blood, but with a stubborn, unyielding faith in what might be built from ashes. His peace held, as long as the rivers flowed, and the heart trees watched, and children's laughter echoed in the streets. And so the realm entered its next age, shaped not by a king's sword, but by the will of its people. An age not of heroes or monsters, but of men and women who remembered what it cost to endure and what it meant to be free. The song of the river, now and forever, was the song of the pack. Kea. Rain swept across the rooftops of King's Landing, gentle but persistent, washing the last soot from stone and turning the garden beds along the city walls into wild, riotous rivers of color. In the godswood, under the heart tree's canopy, the ground had softened, and pale shoots forced their way up through the leaf litter, promising a season of new beginnings. Years had passed since Jon Snow first claimed the Iron Throne, and the memory of war, though never wholly absent, was something that belonged more to stories and songs than to the day's labors. Jon walked the paths of the godswood at dawn, boots trailing dew, the damp earth yielding underfoot. The branches above arched heavy with green-red leaves lingering along the older boughs, and the face carved in the heart tree seemed softened by moss and time. The city's bells tolled the hour behind him, not in alarm, but to wake bakers and smiths, to call children to their lessons in the school Sam had built and to summon the council for another day's work. Peace, John had learned, was not a trophy to be held high, but a discipline, a daily effort, as relentless as the tides. The wounds the realm carried did not vanish. They faded and flared with each new trial, as stubborn as old scars. But each spring he saw more life, more laughter, more hope. He lost count of the festivals, of lanterns floated for the dead and fireworks crackling in the summer dusk to celebrate the living. The realm knew loss and memory, but it had learned joy as well. The council met that morning in the riverside cloister, the space open to air and light. Sansa presided at Jon's left, her hair now silver-shot, her manner unbending but gracious, every inch a queen in her own right. Sam wore a heavy maester's chain, though he left off half its links when working among the city's sick or teaching in the gardens. Brienne, taller than ever, oversaw a cadre of guards in the new gold and white, her laughter booming louder than the young knights she trained. Nymeria Sand sent a deputy from Dorne, and Gendry arrived dusted in flour, as likely to have been forging plowshares as swords. Tormund appeared unannounced, wind-burnt and enormous, his beard now streaked with white, but his voice unchanged. They spoke of irrigation ditches overflowing in the Crownlands, of wildling traders seeking passage down the Trident, of the embers of the last southern fever, now mostly a memory, thanks to Peoflower's network of healers. Each topic was given its due, decisions passed with quick consensus or debate as needed, the city running on a current of mutual trust and practiced ordinary decency. After council, Jon walked with Sam down to the river's edge, where children played under the gaze of their nursemaids, and the last ice of winter slipped quietly away under the city bridges. "You ever think about the past?" Jon asked quietly, watching a flock of swans fight for bread crusts. "All the time?" Sam replied, kneeling to scoop a skipping stone. "But I like the present better. There's more to do and less to fear." He flicked the stone, and it bounced once, twice, before sinking. "You've given them a world where even the timid dare to hope? I never thought I'd see the day." Jon's smile was gentle. "I didn't give it. We built it, all of us. I just kept the watch." Sam nodded, his gaze distant. "Still keeping it?" "Always," Jon replied. "But maybe not forever. The pack is strong. It doesn't need one wolf to watch every shadow." They stood for a moment, watching the children run along the bank. Jon wondered what they would remember. The cold years, the hunger, or only the new safety and the freedom to grow. He hoped, in the end, it would be both. Summer rose bright and slow. The Queen's Road thrummed with traffic. Merchant caravans from the Reach and Dorne, wildling bands bearing pelts and honeycomb, ships sailing upriver loaded with Manderley grain, and long processions of pilgrims come to see the Heart Tree and the city built on hope. Jon and Sansa made a slow tour of the realm, stopping first at Winterfell, where the castle's stones hummed with music and the fields outside the gates lay thick with barley. In Bear Island, Lyanna Mormont, her hair cut short and her arms roped with muscle, showed them her grandchild, a fierce-eyed girl with the strength of 3 cubs and a laugh that echoed over the bay. They hunted, feasted, remembered the dead, and made promises for the next winter's stores. In the Vale, the eerie sky cells were empty for the first time in living memory. Lord Robert had grown into an odd pale man, but he ruled with Sansa's quiet influence, and his knights kept peace along the mountain passes. The Vale's apple orchard sent barrels to the Crownlands, and its falcons soared over fields full of wildflowers. They sailed to White Harbor, where the city gleamed with white stone and banners of every color. Lord Manderley met them with a fleet of fishing boats, and at the city's festival they ate until they could eat no more, laughing as if none of them had ever known fear. Everywhere they went, the land was different. Fuller, braver, more forgiving. Even the free folk, once feared and hated, had settled in the empty lands north of the Neck. carving villages from forest and stone, their children learning the old gods' prayers alongside Sansa's stories. Jon found himself a stranger in these places, a king in name, but more often a guest, a witness to something larger than himself. He accepted this with a peace that had once eluded him, grateful for the shape his life had taken, and the shape he'd helped the realm to carve. One autumn, word arrived from the east, a message sealed in silver, brought by a rider who claimed to have crossed the sea. In the council, Jon unrolled the parchment and read it in silence. To the king of the rivers and the north, from the council of Bravos. We send greetings and seek audience, for the winds that blew cold from your wall now rise on our own shores. Our magisters speak of omens, our priests of storms. We desire peace in council and offer trade in all things. Tyrion, who had returned from a journey to the free cities, nodded sagely. The world changes, and so must we. Trade with Bravos means ships, gold and knowledge. Perhaps more than even Old Town has yet seen. But it also means new perils. The storms they speak of? Dandy her. Sam glanced at his own letters. Red priests write of fire in the east, of rivers boiling, of dragons in dreams. But none have seen it with their eyes. Still, we should answer. At the least, it will bring new words to our old story. Sansa's lips curled. Peace is made not by refusing to speak, but by daring to listen. We host them, and if the storms follow, we will meet them as we always have. Together. Jon agreed, and the council prepared for the arrival of the Bravosi delegation. The months that followed were filled with negotiations and feasts. The Bravosi brought silks and rare spices, tales of new lands, and news of the Summer Isles flourishing under their own new queen. In return, Westeros sent grain and wool, iron and glass, knowledge and hope. One night, after a feast in the Bravos' honor, Jon found himself standing at the city's highest window, staring out at the moonlit bay. Sansa joined him, her eyes thoughtful. They fear change, these magisters, she said softly. They fear the world will leave them behind. Jon smiled. The world always leaves something behind, but it carries more with it, if we let it. She reached for his hand. Do you ever wonder if we did enough? He shook his head. No, because I see it. In every child who laughs, in every field that blooms, in every friend who came from nothing, and now has a place. We did enough, and we did more. And if storms come again, we'll face them. The pack survives. The pack survives. The years rolled onward. The old council gave way to the new, Brian squires grown into knights of their own. Sam students, now maesters and scholars. Wildling elders whose grandsons sat in parliament beside southern lords. Gendry's daughter apprenticed at the forges and invented a new kind of windmill. Nymeria's adopted sons led trade ships to distant islands, their sails gold and red. Paeas healers opened new houses in every major town, and fevers that once killed by the score became rare and mild. Jon became less king, more elder, the wolf in the godswood, as the city's children called him. He kept to the gardens and the school, teaching archery, listening to stories, and settling disputes. He visited every newborn with a token of luck, a wolf carved from driftwood, a lock of ghost's hair, a pebble from the wall. Sometimes he dreamed of snow, of the long cold, of the faces he had lost. Ygritte, Robb, Arya, Daenerys, the brothers of the Night's Watch. Their voices called him gently, not with regret, but with the certainty that memory itself was the truest immortality. He woke from such dreams not with sorrow, but with gratitude. One winter, Sansa fell ill. She lingered for months, each day quieter and more frail. Jon sat by her bed through the long nights, holding her hand, singing the songs of their childhood in the north. When the end came, it was gentle. Her last words were a blessing, her last touch a promise. The city mourned for weeks. Jon walked the ramparts alone, feeling the weight of every year. But Sansa had made him promise not to grieve over long. Life must be lived, not only remembered, she had whispered. He kept his word, though the world was lonelier for her absence. He turned more to Sam, and to the children of the city. letting their laughter fill the spaces her voice had left behind. John outlived most of those who had shaped his time, the maesters, the knights, even the wildlings who had come so far south for hope and a second chance. He watched as the city he'd rebuilt itself again and again, learning, growing, always daring more. On his final spring, as the last snows melted from the Blackwater and the river's song echoed beneath the bridges, John walked the city one last time. He found the children who played in the streets, now grown with children of their own. He walked the market, the godswood, the schools, the forges. He sat beneath the heart tree and whispered a thank you to the gods and ghosts who had guided his hand. At dusk, he returned to his rooms and wrote a last letter, addressed not to any one person, but to the realm itself, to those who come after. The world will not always be gentle. You will know winters and storms and griefs of your own. But remember this, peace is not an end. It is a path, built stone by hands willing to remember, willing to forgive, willing to hope. Hold to your pack, even when the wind howls. Guard the roots and tend the shoots. The river will change its song, but as long as you listen, you will not be lost. Your servant and brother, John Snow. He set down his quill, let his eyes drift shut, and breathed the cool, spring air. That night, the city slept as a gentle rain fell, and in the godswood, the heart tree's branches bowed as if in prayer. When morning came, they found him at peace, his features calm, a smile on his lips. Word spread slowly, and the city gathered not for mourning, but for a festival. Lanterns released on the river, songs sung beneath the heart tree, stories told of the king who had given them not just a throne or a victory, but a future. He was buried beside Ghost and Sansa, beneath the heart tree, as he had wished. The stone read simply, he kept the watch. He remembered, and the pack survived. The city, the realm, the world, changed utterly, but enduring. The story of Jon Snow became not one of swords and sorrows, but of days won, lives healed, and peace chosen again and again. The river sang on, and its song was hope. Dani, Underwater. The sound of the river, always present beneath the city's noise, was gentler now, a memory of hard winters, its waters running wide and clear beneath the arches of bridges that had seen fire and famine and laughter in equal measure. The godswood had grown thick, the heart tree's roots pushing deeper each season, and from its boughs dappled light striped the faces of children listening to the old tales retold. Years unfolded quietly. The realm changed as realms always do, but this time, the change was guided not by conquest or ambition, but by the patient stewardship of those who had learned the bitter cost of war. Jon Snow's name was still spoken, but less as a distant king and more as a neighbor, a familiar presence in stories and rituals, and the daily life of a city that had truly become the heart of the realm. The first great marker of the new age came quietly, with the passage of a law that allowed any free person, of any birth, to own land within the crown lands, if they could prove 2 years' labor, and the trust of their neighbors. Gendry signed the decree in Jon's name. Sansa affixed her seal, and the proclamation was carried from the Red Keep to the smallest farmstead. Suddenly, a child born in the streets or a daughter of the free folk could raise a roof and call it her own. Whole districts of the city blossomed with new gardens, and villages along the Blackwater filled with wildflowers and laughter. Old houses, once haunted by blood and fear, echoed instead with music and children's feet. It was Brienne who walked those neighborhoods at dusk, checking the new-built fences and doorways, sharing tea or bread with anyone who asked. She told the city's children stories of the great wars not to frighten them, but to remind them what had been overcome. When she met a bully or a thief, she never raised her hand in anger, but sat them down in the shade and made them explain themselves. More often than not, that was enough. In later years, people would say the city was gentler because its knights had learned how to listen. Pea Flowers, now white-haired but still tireless, watched over her embers with pride. Their healers' halls, once emergency tents and muddy huts, became the finest hospitals in the realm. places where no one was turned away. Every winter, as fevers still came, they spread knowledge from Dorne to the neck. Every spring, they led the planting of new herbs and flowers in every public square. Sam's school by the river grew into a vast campus, with towers for science and medicine and a long hall for reading and debate. Children of every kind learned there, some sent from distant castles, others the sons and daughters of the city's poorest, others still from the wildling villages or even across the sea. When the students graduated, they scattered throughout Westeros, carrying with them the promise of learning and memory. Tormund died on a hunt north of the Wall, his last days spent teaching 3 generations of free folk to fish, hunt, and laugh in the face of storms. His body was burned as he wished, his ashes scattered in the wind. The wildlings carved a stone in his memory, set it at the edge of the haunted forest, and on it was written, "He never knelt, but he always listened." Nymeria Sand, after decades of serving the realm, retired to Sunspear. She sent letters and fruit baskets, and her adopted children, now grown, captained ships that sailed as far as the Summer Isles and the distant east. One of them, a quiet boy named Corey, returned each year with maps and tales, and the people of King's Landing would gather to listen, hungry for the world beyond their gates. The festivals, New Roots, Lantern Night, the Day of the Singing River, remained, but grew with the city. Each year, more villages sent their own songs and dances, and the processions down the city's main streets grew longer, brighter, and more colorful. Elders told stories of dragons and ice and lost kings, but they always ended with hope. The wolf who kept watch, the woman who remembered, the friends who built peace from the ruins. It was during the 40th festival of New Roots that Sam, hair now a wispy white, stood before the heart tree with Joan's grandchildren and read aloud from his great book. He told of the wars, the cold, the days of hunger and fire, but he always returned to the moment. The realm chose to live, not simply survive. The crowd was silent, children leaning forward to hear every word. After, he walked through the Godswood, stopping at Joan's grave beside Sansa's and Ghost's. The gravestone was mossy and the letters fading, but Sam ran his fingers over them, whispering a prayer to the old gods and the new well. "We remember, John," he said. "We keep your watch still." Later that evening, he found Gendry at the river, skipping stones and watching barges slip under the lanterns. "It's never really finished, is it?" Gendry said, not looking up. "No," Sam agreed, "but neither are we. Every year, it gets a little easier to hope." Gendry grinned. "I'll drink to that." He handed Sam a flask and together they watched the water for a while, quiet and content. A letter arrived in autumn, marked by a wax seal shaped like a feather. It was from Arya, now long gone to the far west, a legend more than a sister. The letter was brief, its words few, but sharp as always. "The world is wide, brother. There is peace here too. You would not believe the forests or the fish that leap by the thousands. Tell them not to fear the wind. Everywhere it blows, there are people building, hoping, remembering. I will come home one day, but not yet. Take care of the pack for me." The council read the letter aloud at the next gathering. And that night, Arya's name was added to the festival songs, so children would remember the one who never stopped wandering, the one whose courage opened every horizon. In time, new challenges rose. The sea crept up the Blackwater during spring floods, and the city's lower wards had to be rebuilt on higher ground. Young smiths, taught by Gendry's apprentices, invented new pumps and dikes to keep the waters at bay. Sicknesses came and went, but each one was met by Pea's healers, and the students Sam had taught, spreading wisdom and comfort instead of panic. Sometimes there were bandits or pirates, but the people met them together, city guards, knights, wildlings, and ordinary folk. The Queen's Guard, now led by Brienne's successors, prided themselves on ending fights without blood. Disputes were settled in public, with the Godswood as witness. Every voice was heard, every injury mended or avenged. The people of King's Landing learned to trust the law and one another. Trade flourished. Ships sailed from the Blackwater to Old Town, Bravos. Even beyond the summer sea, the city became a crossroads of tongues and customs. Its markets rang with the sound of many languages, and its feasts grew ever stranger and more wondrous. The children of wildlings and Dornishmen and Vale traders married and built houses together, and each year the city grew more beautiful, more complicated, more alive. One winter, a child was born who bore the name John. Not a king, but a baker's son. He grew up with the city, played under the heart tree, learned his letters in Sam's school, and by 20 was one of the finest archers in the city guard. He never wore a crown, but when he took a wound in service, half the city came to see him in the healer's hall. At the Lantern Festival, he led the children's procession, holding high a torch to light the night. And so it went, generation after generation. The faces changed, the city changed, but the memory of what had been built endured. There were always festivals, always births and deaths, always old stories and new. One spring, Sam's great-granddaughter rode to a gathering under the heart tree, just as her ancestor had done. She told the children, there was a king once who saved the world, not by slaying a dragon or taking a throne, but by teaching people to trust each other again. He was as stubborn as winter and as gentle as spring. A child asked, was he lonely? Sam's great-granddaughter smiled. Sometimes, but he was never alone. The city fell silent then, listening to the river's music. The lanterns bobbed on the current, their lights reflected in the water, and the faces of the children were bright with hope. A century after John's passing, the heart tree stood even taller, its roots wrapping around the stones of graves and houses alike. The God's Wood, now a public park, drew people from every corner of the realm. At midsummer, people gathered to celebrate, to sing, to remember. On one such night, a storm threatened the city, dark clouds piling high. Instead of fear, the people gathered in the streets, lighting torches and lanterns, telling stories and singing until the rain came. When it fell, it was soft and warm, a blessing, not a threat. Children splashed in the puddles, elders watched from porches and gardens. When the storm passed, a rainbow arched over the city, its colors vivid against the wet roofs. For the rest of that year, it was said the city glowed with a light all its own. In time, other rulers sat the throne, other wars were fought, other names rose and fell. But in King's Landing, and in every town that remembered, the story of Jon Snow endured. Not as a tale of dragons or thrones, but as the lesson of peace, a thing made by many hands, kept by many hearts. The city's anthem became a simple song, sung by children in the marketplace, at every festival, on days of sorrow and days of joy alike. When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Remember us in peace and pain. Remember love, and start again. And beneath the heart tree, carved in a dozen hands, weathered but unbroken, the same words remained. He kept the watch. He remembered. The pack survived. And so the story went on, the river running, the city waking each morning to hope, and the song of peace rising ever new